Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
It's our pleasure to have Elaine Newman, one of our co-presidents, to share announcements with us.
Shabbat Shalom. So beforehand, thank you to Becky Rubenstein, who's going to be blessing our candles and doing Kiddush. And forewarning you that we are not going to read everything going on in the month of May. So it'll be coming out on the weekly email blast, or there's flyers in the lobby. Social Action is collecting laundry detergent until the end of May. Collection bin, I'm sure you saw, if you didn't trip on it, was in the vestibule. The gift shop is hosting a sip and shop for congregants. Trunk show on Sunday, April 16th from 9 to 12:15. And Dewey's Pizza, once again, is April 17th, right after Passover, so that's good. Brotherhood discussion series starts on Wednesday, April 26th at noon. Please contact Larry Kay to RSVP. And of course, don't forget, Temple at the Troubadour, May 20th. Online registration is open and they're starting to come in. And paper invitations will go out after Passover. Shabbat Shalom, have a good Passover.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. I would like to introduce to you Mickey McGroarty, who is going to be our new accompanist. He hails from University of Akron, where he received a Master's of Music in choral conducting and now teaches at Hiram College. You teach voice and piano and choir. So we are so happy to have him, so welcome.
Let's take a moment to turn to your neighbor. Let's make sure everybody's welcome and that we begin Shabbat together. Please turn to those around you, especially if it's someone you do not know, somebody who might be a guest here for the first time, and welcome them and say Shabbat Shalom. Everybody you can all fist bump the Gottlieb boys who are here a couple weeks before their bar mitzvah. We'll begin in our prayer books on page 2. As we invite Becky Rubenstein to light our Shabbat candles and we follow along in the prayer together.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
We continue as we sanctify this Shabbat, page 5 in our prayer books, as we invite Becky to raise our Kiddush cup.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pari hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodesho b'yahavo v'ratzon hinchilanu, zikaron lamasi v'reishit. Ki hu yam dechila lamikrae kodesh, zecher l'tziat mitzrayim. Ki vanu v'charta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim. V'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava uv'ratzon hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. Amen.
Thank you, Becky. Take a moment now to transition from whatever the busyness of our week has been into this space, but also into the head space, the heart space of Shabbat. On page 7, this meditation for us, intended to help us recognize the difference between what Friday was a few moments ago and what Shabbat will be. Where has this week vanished? Is it lost forever? Will I ever recover anything from it? The joy of life, the unexpected victory, the realized hope, the task accomplished. Will I ever be able to banish the memory of pain, the sting of defeat, the heaviness of boredom? So on this day, let me keep for a while what must drift away. On this day, let me be free of the burdens that must return. On this day, Shabbat, abide. Help me to withdraw for a while from the flight of time. Contain the retreat of the hours and days from the grasp of frantic life. Let me learn to pause, if only for this day. Let me find peace on this day. Let me enter into a quiet world on this day. On this day we pray. Shabbat, abide. We welcome Shabbat in song, page 13, with the words of Shiru Ladonai.
Shiru Ladonai kol haaretz. Shiru Ladonai shir chadash. Shiru Ladonai kol haaretz. Shiru Ladonai shir chadash. Sing unto God, all the earth, a new song. I will sing unto God a new song. Sing unto God, and we'll all sing along. All the earth, a new song unto God.
Shiru Ladonai kol haaretz. Shiru Ladonai
shir chadash. I will sing unto God a new song.
Page 20 in our prayer books, the words of L'Chadodi. They call us to welcome Shabbat not only in spirit but physically. As we reach the last stanza of this prayer, we'll turn towards our door. And for those joining us from home, we invite you to turn towards the doorway of your home as we welcome Shabbat into our sacred spaces. Page 20.
Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela penei Shabbat nekabela shamor v'zachor bediborecha hishmiyanu el hamyuchad Adonai echad u'shemo echad l'shemo tiferet l'tchilah Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela penei Shabbat nekabela likrat Shabbat Lechu v'nilcha ki mekor hamaracha merosh mikedem nesucha sof ma'aseh b'mashcha v'techila Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela penei Shabbat Nekabela, Nekabela. Please rise if you are able in body or spirit and face the sanctuary doors or to your home as we welcome in Shabbat. Boi v'shalom, ateret bala, gam b'simcha, u'v'sochola, toch emuneh, am segula, boi kala, boi kala, lecha dodi, likrat kala, penei Shabbat, nekabela, penei Shabbat, nekabela, nekabela. Please join me on page 26 for Chatzi Kaddish. Yikadal v'kadash meraba ve'almad ivrach yurtei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayedechol beit Yisrael ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imeru amen Yehi shmei rabba mevorach Le'olamo me'olmaya yitbarach Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitroman v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal Shemei dekudash barechu Le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata Tushbechata v'nechemata Damiran be'alma Vimeru, Amen.
Page 28, we face east. Page 31. Praise to you, Adonai our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai our God, from whom the evening flows.
Baruch atah Adonai, Hamari v'Ravi.
Page 33. As you taught Torah to those whose names I bear, teach me Torah too. Its mystery beckons, yet I struggle with its truth. You meant Torah for me, did you mean the struggle for me too? Don't let me struggle alone. Help me to understand, to be wise, to listen, to know. Lead me into the mystery.
Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael.
Pages 34 and 35, Shema.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Please be seated. It's an honor to invite Callan and Sebastian to come lead us in Via Hafta. As they look forward, we're looking forward, right? So your B'nai Mitzvah coming up in a couple weeks. We're on page 36 in our prayer books.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושינתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתיכם מארץ מצרים להיות להם אלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
As we turn the page to page 39 and prepare for the words of Michamocha, we know that we are in what is called Shabbat Hagadol, the Shabbat just prior to Pesach, to Passover. And so we have to ask ourselves, what will make Passover unique this year? Will it be the year that the brisket burns? The year that my grandmother painted the railway without us knowing and we all got paint on our hands as we searched for the afikomen? Will it be the year that we talk about violence that's continuing in our schools, wars that are continuing in our world? Will it be a year that we dream of freedoms, increased democracy, a world in which we think about our community healing or perhaps our family, looking for a better year than we've had before or carrying the blessings of the previous year into the future? It is, for us, Passover every year, one of the times in which we mark, much like we do at Rosh Hashanah, we mark what's happened since last time we sat around this table and what do we want to happen in the year to come. With that in mind, page 39, please join with me at the top of the page as we share the words that we share every week, but that particularly this week ring true as we'll share them around our Seder tables. The top of the page. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. Page 40, Michamocha.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש. נורא תהילות עושה פלא, נורא תהילות עושה פלא. מלכותך רעו עליך, בוקע ים, לפני משה ומרים, זה ליאנו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך, אדוני ימלוך, לעולם ועד. Please join me on the next page for the words of Hashkivenu, the prayer we say at night. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, l'shalom, v'ha'amidenu shamreinu l'chayim, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha Shelter us beneath thy wings, O Adonai. Guard us from all harmful things, O Adonai. Keep us safe throughout the night, till we wake with morning's light. Teach us, God, wrong from right, O Adonai. Amen, 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 O Adonai.
Page 46 and 47. We're reminded to pray as if everything depended on God, but reminded to act as if everything depends upon us. Please rise in body or spirit as we turn to the words of our Amidah, beginning on page 46. As we first ask for the ability to pray with authenticity, to find that our words have the meaning we wish for them to have, and as we'll conclude these pages in a few moments with words about peace and with silent prayer, that our hearts are able to say the words that we need to hear as well. Page 46.
Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi agita hilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei avoteinu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora, Elayon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei Hakol, V'zocher chaste avot ha'imahot, u'mevii geula livnei v'nehem, l'ma'an shemo be'ahava, melech ozer u'moshia u'magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham ve'ezrat Sarah. Atah gibor le'olam Adonai, mechayei hakol atah rav lehoshia, Mashiv haruach u'maurid hagashem, Mechalkel chayim bechesed, Mechayei hakol berachamim rabim, Somech noflim berofech olim, U'matir asurim, U'mekayem emunato, Lishenei afar, Michamocha ba'al gevurot, Umido melach, Melech memit u'mechayeh, U'matzmiach Yeshua, V'ne'eman atah lehachayot hakol, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayeh hakol.
Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh, u'kdoshim b'chol yom yihalalucha sala, Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el hakadosh. Please be seated as we share the words on page 57. You are with us in our prayer, our love, and our doubt, in our longing to feel your presence and do your will. You are the still clear voice within us. Therefore, O God, when doubt troubles us, when anxiety makes us tremble, when pain clouds the mind, we look inward for the answer to our prayers. And there may we find you. And there find courage and insight and endurance. And let our worship bring us closer to one another, that all Israel and all who seek you may find new strength for your service. Baruch atah Adonai, she'otecha levadecha b'yirah na'avod. On page 60, the words of Shalom Rav.
Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tatzim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha
תשים לעולם. כי אתה הוא מלך אדום לכל השלום. כי אתה הוא מלך אדום לכל השלום. שלום רב ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. שלום רב ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. שלום רב ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. שלום רב ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. תשים לעולם. תשים
Take a few moments for our own personal prayers.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן.
Having shared our prayers for peace, we turn now to our prayers for healing in the hopes that those whom we know who are suffering in this moment find a refuah shlema, a sense of personal peace in their body, in their spirit. Whatever fights they are fighting and struggles they are facing, we hope they find the truest sense of themselves. Page 253, we share the words of Misha Berach, our healing prayer.
משברך אבותינו מקור הברכה לאמותינו. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen.
If there are names you'd like to share, please share them as we look around the room. Lori Hoffman.
Misheberach imotenu mekor habracha le'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Shabbat Shalom. This is one of the rare Friday evenings that falls at the very end of a long month, which means it's the fifth Friday of the month, which means we don't read Torah tonight, which means I get extra time to talk, which means you should get comfortable. It's also the third part in an impromptu series on what's going on in Israel and how we look at Israel today in terms of a question that has continued to come up, which is what we are seeing in the Jewish state, the beginnings of a civil war. Next week, by the way, Rami Feinstein, our Shaliach, will be speaking in a new edition, a fourth part to the series, which is Q&A with our, he's going to share a little bit about the details of what's been going on with the judicial reforms and also take questions. So every week things change, and we try to do a little bit of an update. Next week will be a longer update, a fuller update from Rami, who's been following it very closely, and having talked with him this week about it. It is not surprising that it's confusing. It is confusing to those who grew up in Israel their whole life. It is therefore confusing and filled with details that we're trying to absorb for those of us who do not live in Israel and follow the daily news. But tonight I wanted to focus on the last in the series of having talked about the idea of what civil wars are and how they begin, to now talk about how they end. And to do so, I want to start with an image that is in the Capitol Rotunda in D.C. If you've been in the Rotunda, you know that there's a series of beautiful images up around the Rotunda showing the history of our country. And one of the images in particular is intended to be the end of the Civil War. The picture is of a Union soldier and a Confederate soldier shaking hands with their weapons still on their shoulders. And next to them, there is a cotton plant and a northern pine planted next to each other. In other words, the idea is that the Civil War ended and the two sides shook hands, became brothers once again, and the cotton bush and the pine tree were planted next to each other. All of a sudden, seemingly we might say in a moment, everything went back to normal. What's unique about civil wars is that unlike wars between nations, the warring parties don't go back to different homes. You have to live with each other after the war. The idea that a civil war ends and everything just goes back to everyone loving each other or feeling as if your family is as unrealistic as I would tell you the fights are between the siblings in my household. You don't fight with each other, say sorry, and then act as if it never happened. We tend to have, Callan's nodding. And we would say the same now looking back on our own civil war in this country. The Civil War ended, but civil rights, slavery may have legally ended, but civil rights was a long battle, and many would say we're still fighting some of those same battles today. It takes a long time for people to recover, if they do, from a civil war. In a recent article written by two professors at the Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs at Harvard, they wrote about why civil wars today are lasting longer than they used to. I thought it was interesting in that they categorized the ways in which civil wars end. So the first is that historically it's a one-sided victory. We get this. One group wins. The other group loses. The winning group gets to make all the rules. The losing group doesn't. This was according to their research, this was overwhelmingly the way that civil wars worked for most of history up until the end of the Cold War. After the Cold War, we had negotiated settlements. Those of us who were who remember our more recent history, remember civil wars like Bosnia-Herzegovina. It was settled with diplomatic negotiations. I looked it up, actually, in Dayton, Ohio, for those who might remember that. So a civil war breaks out. Two people are fighting each other in the same country. And for a short period in history recently, there was some sort of diplomatic negotiation. But after 9/11, the professors say, things changed again. After 9/11, civil wars stopped ending. So if we think about the wars that are happening today, we think about civil war in Syria that continues, civil war in Afghanistan and Iraq and Sudan, in Yemen, and I would add, they did not add this, but I would say, while it's not by definition a civil war, I think the idea that what is happening in Ukraine between two related peoples is a war that seems to not have an end, and that just seems to be accepted, that this is just going to continue. I think that's what they're referring to. That somehow, since 9/11, we've become more comfortable with the idea that there doesn't need to be a resolution, that we're just going to agree to disagree eternally and have two people who have a long, drawn-out war with each other. So, what happened in Israel this week? It was unprecedented protests. For those who followed, for those who haven't been following, the broad headline of what the debate is a push by the current government led by Benjamin Netanyahu to change the ways in which the Supreme Court operates, which would give the people in political power, depending on your opinion, let's say, a degree, and some would say a great degree, of more power in making choices. In other words, they wouldn't be able to be vetoed entirely by the court. They could make laws, they could change the way elections work, and the court wouldn't be able to override that decision by the leading political party. Many have said that this threatens democracy, and it came to a head this week as the protests got so large that they had to close the airport, close the schools, close the hospitals. The country, even the army, was unable to be pulled together. And so Prime Minister Netanyahu halted the bill that he had put forth to change the Supreme Court. He did not remove the bill. He simply said, let's not discuss this right now. But he didn't cancel it. And so some people have said that we should celebrate the fact that the civil war that we were worried about happening was averted. But it isn't. As we're seeing, people who are in favor of what was proposed are now coming out to protest. We're seeing that the legislation wasn't removed. It was simply put on pause to be brought up at a later date. That nothing was resolved. It was de-escalated, perhaps, but there are still concerns about what may come next, and it could be something that's worse. So if we had to choose which of the three endings we've reached in this civil almost war in Israel, we would say that by no means did one side concede or win. And in fact, in his speech to the people, Netanyahu quoted the great story of Solomon about splitting the baby. You remember this story? This doesn't seem like the most kid-friendly story, but we tend to always tell this story to our children, right? There's a child that is two mothers claim is their own, and King Solomon says, I know how we'll figure out who is the mother of this child. We will split the child in two, which of course would mean that the child wouldn't live, and the mother who gives up the child, that is the mother who must be the true mother, because she wouldn't want her own child to die. But if you carry the metaphor, this is what Netanyahu quoted in his quote-unquote concession of pausing the legislation. He said, we should treat this like Solomon. Let's test the waters and split this baby in half and see who screams out of concern for the state of Israel, and that is the people who are the true Zionists. So the metaphor is one that leads one to think that the way you win a civil war today in Israel, according to Netanyahu, is you do it the old-fashioned way. You overcome the other side, and you show that you're the winner. There's a different part of the Bible that, not that he's asked, but if he were to ask me, I would ask Prime Minister Netanyahu to refer to. And it's one that actually speaks directly to the idea of brothers fighting with each other, something that we have lots of in our tradition, and one that's pretty consistent. In the stories, multiple stories of brothers fighting with each other, the two most famous being Jacob and Esau, and Joseph being thrown into the pit by his brothers. In the book of Genesis, they continually use the word when they reconcile, vayigash, which means that they come back together. They get closer to each other. Usually it's translated, they come near each other. They meet would be maybe a better way to translate it. So in other words, nothing gets split apart, but rather they come closer together. It's not simple, though. And in fact, in the story of Jacob and Esau, Esau comes closer to Jacob, and that's when Jacob wrestles with that stranger in the middle of the night. He changes his name. He goes and he finds Esau. Esau comes towards him. He's afraid he's going to attack him. Turns out Esau won't attack him. They hug in that moment. It's a beautiful moment, except in the very next moment, Jacob runs in the opposite direction, fearful that Esau will come after him anyway, and the people that Esau eventually populated are called the Edomites. The Edomites are known to have destroyed Jerusalem generations later. So a story about two brothers coming close. They seem to reconcile, but in the long run they don't. Same thing with the story of Joseph and his brothers. They throw him in the pit. He goes off to Egypt. They come, they find him. They don't know it's him. He starts to punish them, and then he breaks into tears, and he says, I'm your brother Joseph, who you threw into the pit. They reconcile, they cry together. They go to their father, who cries with them. It looks like the family is all going to be okay. They eventually become the tribes of Israel, who separate from each other and create two states, the state of Israel and the state of Judah. They too separate. There's a great quote from a colleague that I think speaks to the fragility, he calls it, of this idea of facing those whom we're fighting with in our own family. He says, the line is very thin between war, reconciliation, and prayer. He writes about it today. He says, in an age when apologies are too often offered by text message, when bellicosity rockets across social media, when prayers are circulated through email, we would do well to remember that the critical and most important point is the act of coming close to one another. But when we approach each other, we might fear that something bad will happen. It could be war, or it could turn into peace. We may expect reconciliation, but it can inadvertently turn into an argument, to a disagreement, or belligerence. A moment when we are ready for a fight, when we are prepared for reconciliation, can likewise be transformed into prayer. So we must be prepared, he writes, for all three. When we come close to each other in the midst of a battle, we might end up praying, we might end up reconciling, or we might end up arguing further. We can't predict what will happen when we draw close to one another. But the Bible adds, in the book of Ezekiel, a different ending. In the book of Ezekiel, using the same word that we draw near one another, it says, take a tree and write on it Judah's people. Take another tree and write on it Joseph's people. Judah and Joseph were two of the brothers initially who were negotiating with each other. Bring the two trees close to each other so that they become one tree, joined together. And when people ask you, what does this mean? Answer them that God will take the stick of Judah and the stick of Joseph and make them into one stick. They shall be joined in God's hands. And you'll hold up before their eyes the stick which you have inscribed with both of their names being one stick together, and tell them, I, God, am going to take the Israelite, I'm going to take the Judahite, and I will make them a single nation in one land. And never again shall they be two nations. Never again shall they be divided into two kingdoms. I will make a brit shalom, a covenant of peace with them. It shall be everlasting, and I will place my sanctuary among them forever. So what does it look like if we go back to that picture and we take the words of Ezekiel? Perhaps If Ezekiel could speak to that picture that's in the Capitol building, it would say the most important part of that picture are the trees. How do you get two trees to become one? If you ask me, which again they don't, I wouldn't talk about trees, I would talk about labradoodles. Anybody have a labradoodle? It's like the most popular dog these days. Everybody talks about labradoodle. Everybody's talking about taking two breeds of a dog and putting it together to make the perfect dog. That's what they're talking about in Ezekiel. They didn't know of dogs. But they're saying you want to solve a civil war, you do two things. You come close to each other, and you create something that's new but that doesn't ignore what you were before, but no one wins. It's a new breed. And that's what they talk about with the trees in Ezekiel, and I think it's a better answer for where we are today. We're too small a people to have half of us ignored, to have one side win over the other, and we're too small a people and Israel's too small a country to have some endless civil war and survive. Which leaves, I believe, the answer that we have to be willing to blend our branches, to become some new third version, a hybrid of what we were before, not right and not left, but some third version, something created new, a hybrid that we can hold high and say, this is who we are now. What we were before is important, but it no longer exists. We have to create some new way. I think we're in the midst of seeing if that'll happen. You can ask Rami next week. My hope, perhaps too optimistically out of this, is perhaps in the coming years we'll find that Israel writes a constitution, something they never have been able to accomplish. Perhaps that will be the document that creates a new definition of what this people is and who they are to us and what their relationship can be to the world. But I hope that it's not one side winning over the other. I hope that it's not an eternal civil war. I hope it's some sort of new hybrid people that we can look at differently and start fresh. Shabbat Shalom. We'll turn now in our prayer books to page 282 as we rise in body or in spirit as we share the words of Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, לתת גדולה לייצר ראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הרצות, ולא שמענו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו
Please be seated. It's hard to sing of oneness when the world is not complete, when those who once brought wholeness to our lives have gone, and not but memory can fill the emptiness their passing leaves behind. It's at this time of year, much like the holidays once again, when we look around our Seder tables and we notice who's not there, where we use recipes from our family that have been passed down and we remember the people, the names associated with those recipes. And so we remind ourselves that we do best homage to those that we've lost. And we remember them, but also when we live our lives most fully, even if it's in the immediate shadow of our loss. For each of our lives is worth the life of the whole world, and each one of us is the breath of God. And in affirming that breath, we affirm the worth of each person whom we've known. We turn to recite the names of those that we've lost in this community in these last weeks: Harvey Efron, Lois Noble, and Stephen Heyman. We add to their names those that we've lost at this time in years past: Isaac Averbach, Evelyn Baer, Murray Cohen, Molly Dutchman, Abe Fetterman, Benjamin Finkel, Bruce Folkerth Sr., Julius Frost, Belle Frost, Clara Heimlich, Joseph Herman, David Hilton, William Hollander, Samuel Kalish, Roy Kirshner, Samuel Klausner, Louis Kodish, Albert Kondritzer, George Corman, Norman Milstein, Dr. Irvin Morris, Pearl Pomerantz, Elsie Riegel, Eleanor Rosenberg, Arthur Ross, Rose Rubenstein, George Schulman, Hannah Schwartz, Hilda Sobel, Maria Sunik, Carl Surloff, Claire Susselman, Selma Tolchinsky, Helen Wides, and Joseph Wiener. If there are names I mispronounced or names you'd like to add, please share them. Page 294, please rise as we share the words of Mourner's Kaddish together. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, b'alma divrach yerutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, b'agala u'v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam olmei olmaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei dekudesha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, damiran b'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us, to all Israel, and to all the world, as we say, amen. Having connected with those that we've loved and lost, we connect with each other as we bless each other with the words of the priests. May God bless you and keep you. May God's light shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May you feel God's presence within you always, in the circle of your family, your synagogue, our city, our world, and our people's country, as we hope that there we find peace.
Amen.
Please be seated as we'll offer people the opportunity to share good moments from this past week, or perhaps moments they're looking forward to as a Shekianu moment. Terry? Wonderful. Wonderful. Within 2 weeks of a bar mitzvah, we know what that feels like. Right? Good. Other simchas, other wonderful things that are going on for people? Kylie has one. On Sunday, Temple Israel will be 158 years old. Well done. Good. Yeah. And the other, can we get one more? Yeah. Elaine?
We just came back from being with our Mutanim and our grandchildren and children, and our granddaughter started to walk. So
Wonderful.
we missed it by 1 day.
Wonderful.
That was a good thing.
Great. So for those who saw their grandchildren this last week and those who will be with family in the week to come, Jocelyn, you want to share something? You can voluntold somebody. That's okay. Yeah, but. Oh. Everybody can notice Sienna's ear piercings next time she's here, and you can, she'll be very proud. We're going to invite the Gottlieb family up to hold our challah as we look forward to the B'nai Mitzvah in a couple weeks, as we'll look to them as we lead, as we share the words of Shechianu together. Boys, you want to uncover we'll call you boys this week, but in a couple weeks we'll call you young men. You want to uncover the challah?
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechianu vekimanu vehigianu lazman hazeh.
Hold up the challah. We'll join together in Motzi.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
You're welcome to tear into it if you'd like. We'll close with the words Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu. Shabbat Shalom to everybody. We invite you to join us for some cookies and treats in the lobby, if you would like. Shabbat Shalom.
Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu ve'al kulam. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu ve'al kulam. Salam Aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam. Salam, salam, salam Aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam. Salam, salam. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu ve'al kulam. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu ve'al kulam. Shabbat Shalom.